looking back on the group we had, and I appreciate that compliment. I think it's a compliment, but we had the character of our group. I could be honest and say
maybe the best catcher in my generation. Maybe, you know, him, Pudge. You're talking about some serious company that guy's in, and you know, super jealous of all the no hitters and.
Strange, but I'm really happy for Jon. That was special. I think I'm happy for him. Very happy for him.
March 2026, and David Ross just dropped something that changes how we see respect in baseball. He's my GOAT. That is what Ross said about the legends who taught him what winning really means. Not the loudest voices or the biggest contracts. The ones who actually built winners from the inside out. The Lovable Reunion podcast just launched, and 10 years after breaking the curse, Ross and Anthony Rizzo are sitting down to tell the real story. The personalities, chemistry, the belief, everything that made 2016 possible. And here's what people forget when they talk about that championship team. David Ross was a backup catcher. Think about that for a second. Backup, not the starter, not the guy getting headlines. Ross spent years being overlooked. Blocked in the minors by bigger names in the Dodgers organization. Told he was not good enough. Told he would never make it. 15 years bouncing between 7 different franchises. Learning, watching, absorbing. Respect was not handed to him on a silver platter. He had to earn every single ounce of it. And the legends he respects? They are not just the biggest stars with the flashiest stats. They are the ones who changed the room, not just the box score. The guys who made everyone around them better. The ones who turned clubhouses into families and rosters into dynasties. This is about the pillars that built a champion. The foundation that held up under 108 years of pressure. So who earns your respect when you spend 15 years across 7 teams and live inside the toughest clubhouses in baseball? What does it take to make David Ross, a guy who saw it all, actually stop and say that person is special? And if you love these behind-the-scenes baseball stories, the real stuff that happens when the cameras are off, tap the hype feature and give this video some hype while we get into Ross's actual list, because this is not about highlights. This is not about who hit the most home runs or won the most awards. Ross is talking about the traits that turn talented rosters into unbreakable teams. The people who taught him dependability, support, and self-awareness. The good teammate philosophy, leading from within. Ross respects 7 core figures who represent different pillars of winning culture. 7 different ways to make everyone better. But he cannot leave out 2 extra legends who shaped his path in ways that deserve recognition. 9 total, each one a different lesson in what it means to be a pro. And by the end of this, you will see why a backup catcher got carried off the field by his teammates as a World Series hero. Why that image is not just a feel-good moment, but proof that respect is the real currency in baseball. Let's start with the framework that drives everything Ross believes. Individual excellence becomes collective influence. That is the filter. That is how Ross measures greatness. Talent wins games, sure, but personalities, chemistry, and belief, that is what wins championships. Ross learned this the hard way. He was stuck behind other catchers in the Dodgers organization for years. Blocked, forgotten, sitting in the minors wondering if his chance would ever come. But he paid attention. He watched how the pros handled pressure, how they prepared when nobody was looking, how they led without needing a captain's patch or a manager's office, how they made everyone around them better just by showing up. And when Ross finally got his chance in the big leagues, he took those lessons and turned them into his identity. By the time he reached Chicago in 2015, Ross was not just a defensive specialist who could call a good game. He was a culture carrier, a leader from within, the guy who could manage egos, handle adversity, smooth over conflicts, and make an ace pitcher feel absolutely invincible. That skill set came from watching legends do it first, from studying the masters. So let's break down the 7 pillars, starting from the bottom and working up to the one Ross calls the absolute gold standard. The guy he points to and says, he's my GOAT without hesitation. Number 7, Ken Griffey Jr. The kid. When Ross talks about Griffey, you hear something different in his voice. Sheer awe. Ross played with Griffey in Cincinnati during the later years of Griffey's career, and even then, watching Griffey was like watching someone from another planet. 630 home runs. A swing so smooth it looked like art, natural talent that seemed effortless. Griffey could do things that made you stop and stare. The way he tracked fly balls, the way he turned on inside pitches, the backward cap, the smile. Griffey was not just a player, he was an icon. But here is what actually earned Ross's respect, and this is the important part. Griffey stayed approachable. Think about that. The face of baseball for an entire generation, one of the most recognizable athletes on the planet. And yet in the clubhouse, Griffey was one of the guys. He did not let fame create distance. He did not build walls. Ross was a young backup trying to find his footing in the majors, bouncing between teams, wondering if he would ever stick. And Griffey treated him like a teammate, not like a nobody. Griffey made time for conversations. He asked questions. He gave advice when it was needed. He kept the clubhouse energy light and positive. That is incredibly rare. Superstars often exist in their own orbit. They have their routines, their entourage, their separate world, and everyone else orbits around them. But Griffey showed Ross that greatness does not require isolation. You can be elite, you can be a Hall of Famer, and you can still make the clubhouse better for everyone. Griffey mentored younger players without being asked. He shared his knowledge, he demonstrated how to handle media pressure, how to deal with fan expectations, how to stay grounded when everyone wants a piece of you. Ross learned that managing fame with grace is its own skill. It is easy to let celebrity overwhelm the team dynamic, easy to become untouchable, but Griffey proved you can carry the weight of a franchise without crushing the culture underneath it. You can be the biggest star in the room and still lift everyone else up. For Ross, that lesson stuck deep. When he eventually became grandpa in Chicago, he borrowed straight from Griffey's playbook. Be great at your role, whatever that role is, but never make it about you. Support everyone around you. Stay humble. Let your presence lift others instead of intimidating them. Make the young guys feel welcome. Make the fringe players feel valued. Griffey was the blueprint for how a legend can still be a good teammate. How someone with every reason to be selfish can choose to be selfless instead. And Ross filed that away, knowing that one day, when he had the chance to influence a clubhouse, he would lead with Griffey's grace. Number 6. Dustin Pedroia, the dirt dog. If Griffey taught Ross about grace under pressure, Pedroia taught him about relentless intensity. Ross and Pedroia were teammates in Boston during the championship years, and Pedroia's work ethic was absolutely uncompromising. No days off, no excuses, no shortcuts. Pedroia refused to accept anything less than 100% effort from himself, and that standard influenced everyone around him like a contagious fire. Ross saw how Pedroia's approach changed the entire clubhouse. Guys played through pain because the dirt dog was doing the same. Guys pushed themselves harder because Pedroia was watching. Pedroia was not a big guy. He was not the most physically gifted player on the roster, but he maximized every ounce of his ability through sheer force of will. He was vocal, visceral, emotional. If you were slacking off, if you were going through the motions, if you were not giving everything you had, Pedroia called it out. Not to embarrass you, not to tear you down, but to push you to be better. To remind you that your teammates were counting on you, that wearing a Red Sox uniform meant something. Ross respected that ferocious commitment to winning. Pedroia would not let anyone coast, and that intensity set the tone for the 2013 Red Sox championship run. Boston had just gone through the marathon bombing in April. The city was wounded, scared, grieving. The Red Sox became more than a baseball team. They became a symbol of resilience, a rallying point, and Pedroia became the engine that drove that team forward. He played hurt. He played angry. He played with a chip on his shoulder every single night. He competed like every at-bat was Game 7 of the World Series. Ross watched that and learned what true intensity looks like. It is not about being loud for the sake of being loud. It is about caring so much that you refuse to let yourself or your teammates settle for less. Pedroia showed Ross that leadership can be demanding. It can challenge people. It can push boundaries. But it has to come from a place of genuine care. Pedroia wanted his teammates to be their best because he knew what they were capable of. He believed in them even when they doubted themselves. And that belief expressed through intensity made everyone better. Ross took that lesson and applied it in his own way. He was never going to be a dirt dog like Pedroia. Ross's personality was different, more calm, more steady. But he learned from Pedroia how to hold teammates accountable without being overbearing, how to push when pushing was needed, how to demand excellence while still being supportive. Pedroia's intensity reminded Ross that respect is not just about being liked. It is about being trusted to tell the truth, to push people when they need it, to care enough to demand their best. Number 5. Jason Varitek, the quarterback. Varitek was Ross's blueprint as a catcher, his model, his measuring stick. They played together in Boston, and Ross describes those years as a masterclass in catching at the highest level. Ross took catcher cues from Varitek every single day, watching how he prepared, how he studied hitters, how he managed pitchers, how he controlled the game from behind the plate. Varitek was the captain of the Red Sox for years. He ran the game like a field general, calling pitches, managing egos, controlling tempo, making split-second decisions that could change the outcome of entire games. Ross watched all of it with the eyes of a student desperate to learn. And what Ross learned from Varitek was that catching is about far more than blocking balls and throwing out runners. It is about leadership. It is about being the steady hand that guides everyone through chaos. Varitek led from behind the plate, which is a different kind of leadership. Servant leadership, no spotlight, no glory, just results. Varitek's job was to make pitchers better, remove obstacles, keep them focused, calm them when they were rattled, fire them up when they were flat. And Varitek did it with an intellectual approach that Ross found fascinating. Game calling is not just about knowing which pitch to throw. It is about reading hitters, understanding situations, recognizing patterns, managing pitcher psychology. Varitek had elite catcher IQ. He could see 2 or 3 pitches ahead. He knew when a pitcher was losing his command before anyone else noticed. He knew when to visit the mound and when to stay put. He knew when a hitter was sitting on a certain pitch. And he framed pitches at a gold standard level, turning borderline calls into strikes with subtle positioning and presentation. Ross studied all of it. Varitek helped Boston win championships in 2004 and 2007. He did not need to be the loudest voice in the clubhouse. He just needed to be the most dependable. The guy everyone could count on to do his job at the highest level every single night. And Varitek did it without seeking credit or recognition. That humility combined with excellence earned him deep respect from everyone in that organization. Varitek taught Ross that catchers are not just defensive players. They are the engine of trust. If a pitcher believes in his catcher, he throws with confidence. If he doubts the game plan, he hesitates. And hesitation in baseball gets punished. Varitek eliminated doubt. He made pitchers feel secure. He gave them a foundation to build on. And that became the model for what Ross would later do with Jon Lester, the personal catcher dynamic. The battery as one psychological unit, 2 minds working as one. Varitek laid that foundation in Ross's mind. He showed Ross what elite catching looks like, and Ross built on it for the rest of his career. Number 4, Chipper Jones. The professional. Ross spent time with Chipper during his years with the Atlanta Braves, and what he witnessed was a Hall of Fame career in its final chapter. But Chipper did not coast. He did not rely on his reputation. Every single day, Chipper treated his preparation like a ritual, meticulous, clinical, obsessive. He approached every at-bat, every defensive repetition, every moment on the field with the same level of focus and intensity. Ross was in absolute awe. For a journeyman who spent years being blocked by bigger names, who fought and scratched just to stay in the big leagues, watching Chipper was like attending a university course on professionalism. Chipper commanded respect without raising his voice. He did not need to give speeches or pound tables. His presence in the lineup was stabilizing all by itself. Teammates knew that if Chipper was locked in, the whole offense would follow his lead. Opponents knew they were facing a nightmare. And Chipper delivered night after night with a consistency that seemed almost robotic. But it was not robotic. It was professional. There is a difference. Ross learned a critical lesson from Chipper that changed how he viewed his own career. Every player, regardless of their spot on the depth chart, regardless of whether they are a starter or a backup, has a professional obligation to be ready for the highest pressure moments. There are no excuses. You are either prepared or you are not. And if you are not prepared, you are letting your teammates down. Chipper's final season in 2012 was a perfect example of this mindset. Despite his legendary status, despite everything he had already accomplished, Chipper remained a pro's pro. He showed up early. He did his work. He competed with the same fire he had as a rookie. He did not coast on reputation or past glories. That consistency, that refusal to take shortcuts even when nobody would have blamed him, influenced how Ross viewed his own role. Ross knew he was never going to be an everyday starter. His path was different, but he could be the most prepared backup in baseball. He could study harder, work smarter, be ready for any situation. And when his number was called, he could deliver. Chipper gave Ross permission to take pride in professionalism, even when the spotlight was not on him, even when the casual fan did not know his name. The work still mattered. The preparation still mattered. Being ready still mattered. And that mindset carried Ross through 15 years in the majors. It allowed him to stick around when other backups faded away. It made him valuable to every organization he joined. Chipper showed Ross that being a pro is not about talent. It is about approach. An approach is a choice you make every single day. Number 3, Joe Maddon, the architect of freedom. Maddon occupies a unique space in Ross's respect hierarchy because Maddon was not a teammate or a fellow player. He was the manager who unlocked Ross's full leadership potential and gave him permission to become the leader he was meant to be. When Ross joined the Cubs in 2015, fresh off winning with Boston, Maddon did something radical for a manager. He empowered veteran leaders to run the clubhouse themselves. Maddon trusted Ross to be an on-field coach, to manage different personalities, to bridge gaps between cliques and generations, to be the voice of reason when tensions flared. Maddon created what he called a freedom to be yourself culture, and Ross absolutely thrived in that environment. Maddon taught Ross that successful baseball management is not about controlling every detail or micromanaging every decision. It is about understanding that personalities and chemistry matter just as much as talent and strategy, maybe even more. Maddon's philosophy was simple but revolutionary. Give players the space to be themselves, create an environment where they feel safe to express their personalities, and they will perform better. No rigid rules that crush individuality, no suffocating structure that makes everyone feel like robots. Just trust, accountability, and freedom. Ross respected Maddon's ability to stay steady through the brutal grind of 162 games. Baseball is a marathon, not a sprint. There are slumps, losing streaks, injuries, drama. Maddon did not overreact to any of it. He did not panic during bad stretches. He did not make rash decisions based on emotions. He kept the clubhouse atmosphere loose and positive with themed road trips and pizza parties and quirky team-building exercises. Those moments might seem silly or frivolous to outsiders, but they were actually pressure relief valves. The Cubs were trying to break a 108-year championship drought. The weight of that history, the expectations from an entire city, the constant media scrutiny, all of it could have crushed the team under unbearable pressure. Maddon's freedom culture gave them room to breathe. It let them be human, and Ross was the perfect cultural ambassador for that philosophy. He mediated between groups. He smoothed over conflicts before they escalated. He reinforced Maddon's message in the language that players understood. He led from within, creating trust and cohesion. Maddon showed Ross that leadership is not about having the biggest title or the loudest voice. It is about earning trust and using that trust to make everyone better. And when Maddon handed Ross that level of trust, Ross became the leader the Cubs desperately needed. That alignment between manager and veteran catcher, that partnership built on mutual respect and shared philosophy, allowed Chicago to handle crises with a resilience that had been missing from the franchise for over a century. When adversity hit, when pressure mounted, when everything seemed to be falling apart, the Cubs stayed calm. They believed in each other. They believed in the process. And that belief came directly from Maddon's steady leadership and Ross's ability to translate it into clubhouse action. Number 2. Anthony Rizzo, the emotional center, grandpa and grandson. That nickname captures everything about the bond between Ross and Rizzo, and it became the heart and soul of the 2016 Cubs identity. When people think about that championship team, they think about young talent and a breakthrough moment. But the secret sauce was the relationship between the old veteran and the young star. Rizzo was the first baseman with gold glove defense and serious power at the plate, but Ross respected him for reasons that went way beyond statistics and awards. Rizzo had something rare and valuable: emotional intelligence. He could read a room better than anyone Ross had ever seen. He knew when the team needed to lighten up and when they needed to lock in. He knew when to crack a joke to ease tension and when to deliver a serious message. He bridged personalities in a diverse clubhouse full of big egos and different backgrounds. Ross saw Rizzo as what he calls a character guy, someone who is accountable to his teammates, someone who supports others with genuine sensitivity and care, someone who puts the team first even when individual glory is within reach. During the 2016 World Series run, Rizzo's leadership was on full display for anyone paying attention. His famous naked speeches became the stuff of legend inside that clubhouse. His Rocky-inspired motivation talks, delivered with humor and passion, served as release valves for the immense tension surrounding the curse of the Billy Goat. Rizzo knew how to handle pressure with the perfect mix of humor and perspective. He kept things light when the weight threatened to crush everyone. And that skill, that ability to manage the emotional temperature of an entire team, kept the Cubs from crumbling under expectations. Ross respected Rizzo's transparency most of all. Rizzo did not pretend to have all the answers. He was vulnerable. He admitted when he was nervous or scared. He let his guard down, and that honesty made everyone else feel safe to do the same. It created psychological safety, a clubhouse where players could be real with each other instead of hiding behind fake confidence. Rizzo's leadership style was collaborative, not hierarchical. He did not demand respect through intimidation or fear. He earned it through authenticity and care. And in March 2026, the launch of the Lovable Reunion podcast proved that the bond between Ross and Rizzo is still incredibly strong. 10 years after the championship, they are sitting down together to reflect on the personalities, the chemistry, and the belief that made it all work. They are telling the untold stories, interviewing former teammates, documenting what really happened behind the scenes. Ross credits Rizzo with helping him mentor the next wave of Cubs stars like Chris Bryant and Kyle Schwarber. Rizzo was the bridge between generations. He connected Grandpa's old-school wisdom with the young talent's modern approach. He made sure the veterans' voices were heard without making the young guys feel disrespected. That balance is incredibly hard to strike, but Rizzo did it naturally. And that allowed Ross to influence the next generation without overstepping or alienating anyone. Rizzo's emotional intelligence made the whole leadership system work smoothly, and Ross recognized it, valued it, and learned from it. Rizzo taught Ross that leadership is not about being the toughest or the loudest or the most talented. It is about understanding people, reading their emotional needs, providing what they need exactly when they need it. That is the grandson's gift to the team, and Grandpa respected it deeply. Number 1, Jon Lester. He's my GOAT, the gold standard, the bedrock of reliability, the definition of what a teammate should be. If you ask David Ross who defines what it means to be a teammate, the answer is Jon Lester. Their partnership started in Boston and reached its peak in Chicago. It was built on mutual professional respect that became so strong it influenced Lester's free agent decisions. When Lester signed with the Cubs in 2015, one of the reasons was knowing Ross would be there. That is how deep the trust ran. Ross calls Lester the gold standard for teammates. Legendary competitiveness, bulldog mentality, relentless. In the postseason, the Lester-Ross tandem functioned as a single psychological unit. They were not just pitcher and catcher. They were one brain, one will, one mission. Ross respected Lester for his reliability. When Lester took the mound, the entire roster felt secure. He was the backbone, the horse, the guy who maximized the team's chance of winning through sheer force of will. Lester's physical talent was obvious. 3 World Series rings, over 200 career wins, dominant left-hander. But what Ross respected most was Lester's approach. Lester was a bulldog. He competed with an edge. He did not back down. He attacked hitters, and he demanded the same intensity from his catcher. Ross loved that. He thrived under that pressure. Managing Lester's intensity became Ross's signature skill, keeping the bulldog focused and disciplined through the middle innings of high-stakes games. That synergy was the foundation of the 2016 Cubs clubhouse. When Lester was on the mound, everyone believed, and Ross was the one who kept Lester locked in. The personal-catcher dynamic is rare in modern baseball. Most pitchers work with whoever is catching that day. But Lester insisted on Ross. That bond gave Lester confidence, and it gave Ross purpose. Ross was not just a backup. He was Lester's catcher, the ace whisperer, the guy who could call a game that made a bulldog feel unstoppable. And in the Game 7 of the 2016 World Series, after the Cubs blew a lead and the Cleveland Indians tied it up, Lester came out of the bullpen in relief. He had not relieved in years, but Maddon called on him and Lester answered. Ross caught him, and together they held the line. That moment encapsulated everything Ross respected about Lester. Reliability, grit, willingness to do whatever it took to win. Lester taught Ross that being a great teammate is not about stats. It is about showing up when it matters most, being the guy others can count on, carrying the weight without complaining, and doing it with a bulldog mentality that refuses to accept defeat. That is why Lester is number one. That is why he's my GOAT for Ross, because Lester represents the ultimate version of what Ross values. Backbone, trust, reliability, the gold standard. But Ross cannot leave out 2 more legends. Guys who shaped his journey in ways that deserve recognition. These are not part of the main 7, but they are essential to understanding how Ross became the leader he was. First, Jon Lester, the enforcer. Lester had an I did not come here to get a haircut attitude, blunt, results-oriented, winning above all else. Ross caught Lester during the 2013 Red Sox run and reunited with him in Chicago for 2016. Lester was a bulldog on the mound, just like Lester, but Lester's edge was different. He was brutally honest. He held teammates accountable, and he looked inward after losses instead of pointing fingers. Ross respected that. Lester's postseason grit was legendary. He thrived under pressure. He demanded excellence from everyone around him. And in the 2016 Cubs clubhouse, Lester provided veteran stability. He balanced the youthful energy of guys like Rizzo and Bryant. He brought an edge, a refusal to accept mediocrity. Lester taught Ross that honesty is a form of respect. If you care about your teammates, you tell them the truth. You do not sugarcoat. You do not let them slide. You push them to be better. And you start by looking in the mirror first. That lesson stayed with Ross. When he became a manager from 2020 to 2023, Ross often said we have to look inward and see where we need to improve. That came from Lester, the willingness to accept responsibility and demand the same from others. Second, David Ortiz, Big Papi, the psychological force. Ortiz earned Ross's respect through his ability to perform in the highest pressure moments. When Ortiz stepped into the batter's box, it changed the psychology of the entire game. Confidence for his dugout, dread for the opposition. Ross saw how Ortiz's presence influenced everyone. Ortiz was larger than life, but he remained a supportive teammate. He looked out for everyone in the organization, from parking attendants to owners. That holistic approach to being a teammate influenced Ross's grandpa persona. Ross wanted to care for the whole staff, not just the players. Ortiz showed him how. Ortiz also taught Ross about carrying weight. Ortiz carried the hopes of an entire city on his shoulders. Boston needed him to be clutch, and he delivered, over and over. That ability to rise in the biggest moments was something Ross admired deeply. Ross was never going to be a clutch hitter like Ortiz, but he could be clutch in his own way, by calling the right pitch, by steadying a rattled pitcher, by leading the clubhouse when things got tense. Ortiz proved that leadership comes in many forms, and Ross learned to find his own version of it. So those are the 9, 7 pillars, plus 2 legends Ross could not leave out. Each one taught Ross a different lesson about what it means to be a professional. Grace from Griffey, intensity from Pedroia, intellectual leadership from Varitek, professionalism from Chipper, freedom from Maddon, emotional intelligence from Rizzo, reliability from Lester, honesty from Lester, psychological dominance from Ortiz. and Ross absorbed all of it. He synthesized those traits into his own identity, leading from within, good teammate philosophy, dependability, support, and self-awareness. That became the Ross brand, and in 2016 it all came together. The climax of Ross's entire story, the moment where everything came together, is Game 7 of the World Series. November 2nd, 2016. First at Wrigley Field, then at Progressive Field in Cleveland. The Cubs led the series 3-1. One win away from breaking the curse, then Cleveland roared back and forced Game 7. Winner take all. Everything on the line. 108 years of heartbreak and suffering hanging in the balance. The Cubs built a lead early, 6-3 heading into the bottom of the 8th inning. Ross had already written his own storybook ending. His final at-bat in the big leagues ever was a home run. Picture perfect. The old man going out on top. But then Rajai Davis happened. Bottom of the 8th, 2 outs. Aroldis Chapman on the mound, the best closer in baseball. Davis crushed a 2-run homer into the night. Tie game, 6-6. Just like that, 108 years of heartbreak came flooding back. The curse felt real again. The ghosts of 1908 were laughing. This was the crisis moment, the pressure point where teams either shatter into pieces or find a way to rise above. And the Cubs rose. Why? Because everything Ross respected in those 9 legends showed up in that exact moment when it mattered most. Lester's backbone and reliability. The Cubs had their bulldog ready to come out of the bullpen if needed. Rizzo's emotional intelligence kept the dugout from spiraling into panic. Maddon's freedom culture had built the kind of resilience that does not crack under pressure. The team did not fall apart. Lackey's brutal honesty meant players looked inward instead of pointing fingers and making excuses. Ortiz's lesson about carrying weight reminded everyone that truly great teams find a way to deliver in the biggest moments. Pedroia's dirt dog intensity pushed them to compete even harder when everything seemed lost. Varitek's catcher IQ lived on in Ross's game calling and leadership. Chipper's professionalism ensured that everyone stayed ready for whatever came next. Griffey's grace kept egos in check and the team unified. All of it. Every single lesson, every pillar, every trait Ross had absorbed over 15 years, it all mattered in that moment. The game went to extra innings, then the skies opened up. A rain delay, 17 minutes that felt like an eternity. The Cubs huddled together in a weight room. They talked. They refocused. They reminded each other why they were there. And when they came back out, they were ready. 10th inning. The Cubs scored 2 runs, 8-6. Then Cleveland fought back again, 8-7, 3 outs away from history, and the Cubs got them. The final out. Chris Bryant to Anthony Rizzo, first base, the curse broken. 108 years of waiting, over, pandemonium. And David Ross, the backup catcher, the journeyman who spent years blocked and overlooked and underestimated, was right at the center of it all. Ross was carried off the field by his teammates after that game. That image became iconic. Grandpa being lifted up by the family he helped build. Ross did not have the best statistics on that team. He was not the MVP. He did not hit 30 home runs or drive in 100 runs. But he was absolutely essential to what they accomplished, because he led from within. He made Lester feel invincible. He kept Rizzo grounded and focused. He reinforced Maddon's culture every single day. He embodied every lesson he learned from every legend he respected, and his teammates recognized it. They knew what Ross meant to that team. That is why they carried him. Pure respect. The legacy of that moment is still unfolding. In March 2026, Ross and Rizzo launched the Lovable Reunion podcast. 10 years later, they are telling the untold stories, interviewing teammates like Chris Bryant and Jon Lester, documenting the personalities, the chemistry, and the belief that made 2016 possible. Ross is not just reminiscing, he is teaching, showing the next generation what it takes to build a winning culture. The podcast is proof that the bonds from 2016 are still strong. Grandpa and grandson are still connected, the lessons are still relevant, and the respect Ross earned as a player became the foundation for his respect as a manager. From 2020 to 2023, Ross managed the Cubs. He tried to implement the freedom to be yourself culture he learned from Maddon. Owners praised him for creating a great clubhouse culture and maintaining a steady, balanced approach. Ross faced challenges. Consistency was hard to achieve, but he never lost sight of the core lesson. Look inward, improve, lead from within. That is the Ross way, and it all came from watching legends do it first, from learning what respect really means, from understanding that individual excellence only matters if it becomes collective influence. So, what makes someone worthy of respect? According to David Ross, it is not about fame or stats or awards. It is about how you change the room, how you make your teammates better, how you show up when the pressure is highest, how you prepare, how you compete, how you lead without needing a title. Lester showed Ross that reliability is the foundation. Rizzo taught him emotional intelligence. Maddon gave him freedom. Chipper modeled professionalism. Varitek demonstrated servant leadership. Pedroia brought intensity. Griffey displayed grace. Lackey enforced honesty. Ortiz carried the weight, and Ross learned from all of them. He built a career on respect. Not the kind you demand, but the kind you earn. By being dependable, by supporting others, by being self-aware enough to know your role and excel at it. That is the good teammate philosophy. That is leading from within, and that is why a backup catcher became a World Series legend. Because Ross understood something fundamental. Talent wins games, but the personalities, the chemistry, and the belief win championships. The 2016 Cubs proved it, and Ross's 9 respected legends showed him how. Now it is your turn. Who would you put on your respect list? Who are the teammates, coaches, or mentors who taught you what it means to lead? Drop a comment and let me know. And if you want more stories like this, deep dives into what really makes champions, hit the like button and subscribe. We are just getting started. This is the kind of behind-the-scenes baseball content that shows you what winning really looks like. Not the highlight reel, the hard work, the relationships, the respect. That is what builds dynasties. And David Ross lived it every single day. He's my GOAT. Not because he was the biggest star, but because he set the standard for everyone else. He showed that you do not need to be the MVP to be truly essential. You just need to be the kind of teammate that others respect. The kind who makes everyone around you better. The kind who leads from within. That is the Ross legacy. That is the lesson. And 10 years later, it still matters. Because respect never goes out of style. It is the currency of championship baseball. And David Ross earned every bit of it.